So as we go through the second chapter of Ketubot, we're going to get into questions about evidence and testimony, and particularly about reliability. Who is considered reliable to testify, particularly, if there's only one witness and no documentary evidence. And we learned some really important principle yesterday. Hapeh she'asar hu hapeh shehitir. The mouth that forbade or forbade is the mouth that permitted. In other words, if a person says something, let's say, disbeneficial about himself, in this, the case brought in the Mishnah is he says, this field belonged to your father. If he says this field belonged to your father, but then he says, oh, I bought it from him, he's believed. Because he didn't need to say the field belonged to your father in the first place. He could have just kept quiet. He's clearly farming the field. So because he begins by saying this field belonged to your father, in other words, he's asserted your father's ownership, he's believed when then he says, I bought it from him. The mouth that forbade is the mouth that permitted. That's the rabbinic principle. And we're going to return to this principle. But before we do that, we're going to complete a little segue into handwriting. So we closed yesterday on a question of handwriting. Some witnesses said this is our handwriting, but we were forced to agree, or we were minors, or we were inadmissible. And we're now going to just complete the circle on handwriting before we get back to this principle, that the mouth that forbade is the mouth that permitted. So, closing the circle on handwriting, the Mishnah declares, Ze omer ze ktav yadi, v'ze ktav yado shel chaveri. Someone says, this is my handwriting, and this is the handwriting of my chaver, my fellow. There are probably two signatures on a document. The easiest way to visualize this is two signatures on a document. Maybe on a ketubah, by the way, but it could be on any document. And so the first witness says, it's my handwriting. I testify to my handwriting, my signature, and to that of the other signatory. And then, v'ze omer ze ktav yadi, v'ze ktav yado shel chaveri. The other one says the same thing. I testify to my handwriting and to the handwriting of my fellow. So there are two signatures and two witnesses for each signature. And the Mishnah rules, well, we're going to expect this now. Hare elu ne'emanim, they're believed. Well, of course they're believed. There are two witnesses and two signatures. Why not? That's our starter for 10. Let's keep going. Ze omer ze ktav yadi, v'ze omer ze ktav yadi. One of them says, this is my handwriting. And the other says, this is my handwriting. These are two signatures. So now each signature only has one witness. And Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is going to say, Tzrichem sheyitztaref imahem acher, divrei Rabbi. Rabbi says, we need another witness to join up to them. One witness on one signature is not adequate. The sages are going to disagree. V'chachamim omrim, einan tzrichim sheyitztaref imahem acher, eila ne'eman adam lomar ze ktav yadi. And the sages say, we don't need to join up a third witness, because normally a person is believed when he says, this is my handwriting. And the halakha, by the way, goes according to the sages. A person is believed when he says, this is my handwriting. But the sages have got another slightly more fundamental principle, which I think is articulated in the Gemara. It's certainly articulated in the commentators, which is the following question: are we testifying about the signature, or are we testifying about the document? We're talking here about witnesses on a document. Let's visualize a ketubah. The ketubah contains all the details of the marriage. And the function of the witnesses is just to certify that this is a good ketubah, that the marriage really did take place. And what the sages are saying in principle is, look, we might only have one witness for each signature, but we have two witnesses for the document. The evidence here is about the correctness of the document. It's not about the correctness of the signature. And because we have two witnesses to the document, as evidenced by the two signatures, and of course the two people who say, this is my signature, because we have two witnesses to the document, we don't have any anxiety about its provenance. That seems to be, at least according to the Gemara, the fundamental reasoning of the sages. And the halakha goes according to the sages. Having said that, we've segued away. We've gone away from Ketubot. Well, we're still of course, in the business of truth and evidence, but we've segued away directly from Ketubot and from the principle of the mouth that forbade is the mouth that permitted. So now the Mishnah is going to return to its theme. Ha'isha she'amra eshet ish ha'iti ugrusha ani ne'emenet she'apeh she'asar hu ha'peh she'itir. A woman says, I was once married, and now I am divorced. Okay, in other words, she's free to remarry. Ne'emenet, she's believed. We're going to see this, by the way, right through the tractate of Ketubot. Generally, the general sense of many, many discussions in Ketubot is that we believe a woman even as a sole witness. It's going to come back again and again and again. She's believed. And the rabbis give their reasoning. The mouth that forbade is the mouth that permitted. We never even think that she wasn't single if she hadn't begun by saying, I was married once. So if we believe her when she says she was married, we have to believe her when she says she's divorced. And it doesn't always work that way. If there are witnesses that she was married, so it's known she was married. V'hi omeret grusha ani. So she comes along and says, I'm divorced. And the presumption must be, by the way, there's no document. Obviously, if she was holding a get, if she was holding a bill of divorce that was witnessed, there'd be no problem. This must be a situation where there's maybe she's lost the get, she must have lost the get in some way, or it's gone missing. She comes along and she says, Grusha ani, I'm divorced, einan emenet. We don't believe her. And of course, the issues about remarrying, the issues about bigamy are treated incredibly seriously by the sages. So we can understand that. And the Mishnah then relates a parallel case. She says, I was taken captive, but I remained undefiled. And the assumption in the time of the Mishnah, maybe very sadly we're seeing this today, the assumption in the time of the Mishnah is that if a woman is taken captive in war, she must have been raped. That is the core assumption of the Mishnah. Okay, they're living in Rome. I mean, that is their view of, that's their view of society at the time. And if she's been raped, she can no longer marry a Kohen. So there are implications. Let's go back to our Mishnah. If she says, I was captured, but I was not defiled, we believe her. The mouth that forbade is the mouth that permitted. This is a parallel Mishnah. It's a carbon copy. The Mishnah loves doing this. It's let's say it's like halachic poetry. It's the second verse. If there are witnesses that she was taken captive, and then she says, I remained undefiled, she's not believed. If after she'd married the Kohen, the Gemara, by the way, can't quite deal with this idea and says, no, this is after she'd had permission to marry the Kohen. But anyway, if after she married, if the witnesses came after she married, he doesn't have to divorce her. So in other words, after the fact, this is acceptable. And the Rambam goes on the Rambam comments on this Mishnah with an extraordinary postscript, but it's a postscript which really testifies to the theme that I mentioned, Isha Ne'emenet, woman is believed. And the Rambam comments on this Mishnah. Uksha amra eshet ish ani. If she says, I'm married, and after some time she says, I'm single, I'm not married. But I previously claimed to be married for such and such a reason. Ne'emenet, she's believed. Udvarav nishma'im, and her words are accepted. Ubilvad shetiten amatla lidvareha, providing she gives some reasoning, and amatla is a sort of a reasoned excuse, providing she gives some reasoning for her original statement and providing there are no witnesses. And I found this an extraordinary statement by the Rambam. I mean, essentially, he's saying that a woman can show up in town and give two contradictory stories. And kind of at a psychological level, we can understand this. There might be many reasons why a woman might want to say, please don't get involved with me, I'm married. But the Rambam is saying, look, we recognize that psychology. And if she changes her mind later, we believe her.